All right, here are our notes for the worksheet that's labeled characteristics of linear equations. We're going to talk about two different graphs. We're just going to touch base on these. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about the difference between discrete graphs and continuous graphs. What we're really going to talk about are domain and range. Excuse me. So discrete graphs, you just simply list the domain and range. And I don't know if we'll actually get to it in the rest of these notes or not, but we will talk about that eventually. Continuous graphs, you use what's called interval notation. So a list would look something like 1, 2, 3, 4. We're just listing numbers. And then an interval notation would look something like that right there, that my domain is something from 0 to 5. But again, don't spend a whole lot of time trying to figure that out because I don't think we even use it in this worksheet. So blanks are used when there is an open dot or the number is not included in the on the graph. So those are called parentheses that we're going to use. And then brackets are used when there is a closed dot or when the number is included on the graph. Again, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that, but these are called brackets. All right, so here's the meat and potatoes of what we're doing today. We want to find out what the domain and the range of this line is right here. We're going to assume, since it's going all the way across the graph and there's really arrows there, so even though it's going up a whole lot faster than it's going to the left, it is going to eventually continue to go farther and farther, so that there will always be an x coordinate that'll go up and touch that line. So my domain is going to be negative infinity, because it would keep getting wider and wider going this way. And since I can't actually touch negative infinity, I'm going to put parentheses right there. And then it's going to stop going that way, same thing at positive infinity. At 5, I could go down far enough to where I would touch this line. At 10, I could go down far enough to touch that line. At 1,000, I could go down far enough to where I could still touch that line. And you could keep going all the way to infinity. Now the range is a lot easier to see on this one. This arrow is pointing down. Well, my negative numbers are down and it's never going to stop. So my range is going to be negative infinity to positive infinity. Now this one's a little different. My domain and range are not going to look alike. My domain, well, this U is going to keep getting wider and wider and wider and wider and wider. So at negative 5, I'd be able to go up and still touch that U. At negative 10, I could still go up and touch that U. At negative 1,000, I could still go up and touch that U, all the way to negative infinity. And that's the same thing on this side. At 5, I could go up and touch that U. At 10, I could go up and touch that U, all the way to positive infinity. That U is going to keep getting wider and wider. The range, now the range is going to look different. So the lowest Y value of this U is right here. We're going to call that negative 6. And on this one, it actually has a dot there touching negative 6. So I'm going to put a bracket around that. And then these go up forever. So it's going to go to positive infinity. So the domain and range on number 3. So number 3, well, there's as far left as it goes right there, which is at negative 4 on the x-axis. There's a closed circle there. That means I need to include negative 4. Closed circle here at 5. So there is that. Another way to write this would have been negative 4. So I need all my numbers greater than negative 4 or equal to negative 4 all the way to 5. So there are two different ways you could write that. And then my range, well, the highest it's going to go is right there, which is 4, and the lowest is going to be is negative 5. And we're always going to write the lowest number first. So negative 5 comma 4. I'm going to include both of those. Or I could write it negative 5 to 4. So that's just negative 5 to 4, and the lines underneath tell me that I'm including those. All right, next let's talk about the intercepts. The x-intercept is the point at which the line intersects the x-axis. Its coordinates are always going to be a number, comma, 0. The y-intercept is the point at which the line intersects the y-axis. It's always going to be 0, comma, y. Zeros are the same thing as the x-intercepts. There's a couple different words that we can use to describe the x-intercept, but for now all we're going to talk about are the zeros. So domain and range. So all lines, every time we see a line, the domain is always going to be negative infinity to positive infinity. There's only one exception, and that's if it's a vertical line. So any line that is not vertical is going to have a domain and range of negative infinity to positive infinity. The only two that are different from that is if it's a vertical line or a horizontal line. And this one has a slope, so it's domain and range. So now let's find the x-intercept. So we know it's got to be a number, comma, 0. Well, there it is right there. And the number is going to be the x value, and 0, which is still a number, is going to be the y value. So it's at 2, comma, 0 is where that line crosses the y-intercept. The y-intercept is down here at negative 8, and we're going to write that as 0, comma, negative 8. So that's what these two things here. If you're talking about the x-intercept, we're going to have a number other than 0, comma, 0. I guess it could be 0, comma, 0. And then the y-intercept, the first number is always 0, comma, wherever it's touching the y-axis. Domain and range. Again, as long as it's a line that is not vertical or horizontal, the domain and range is never going to change. Let's talk about the x-intercept. Looks like it's right there at 14. So it's going to be 14, comma, 0. You have to give it to me as a coordinate pair. And then my y-intercept is 0, comma, 7. Looking to see if there's another page to do on these notes. Give me 1 second. I think this is it. All right. Domain and range. Well, it's a line that's not a vertical or horizontal, so my domain and range is going to be negative infinity, comma, positive infinity, both of them. And then my x-intercept looks like it's at, that must be negative 13 right there. So it's going to be negative 13, comma, 0 with parentheses. My y-intercept is at 11, so that one's going to be 0, comma, 11. And that is it. So we'll work on these worksheets. Some of y'all won't see it till next week. Some of y'all will see it this week. Thank you.